Louis, I have a 50mm Apo. I need the highest resolution out of an M camera. What can you offer me?
24 megapixels.
Not good enough. Welcome back, DPReview TV viewers. Chris Nichols here. And you know, the Leica M system, since the M240 8 years ago, has been stuck in 24 megapixel resolution land. And of course, they've broken that with other systems like the Leica Q2 system, the Leica SL, but now we have the natural progression of the Leica M series. We've got the M10-R with a 40 megapixel sensor. It's about time. Got a 50mm f2 Apo to try it out with today. Let's see what we get. Now, as far as the handling and menus on the new M10R, there's really not much to talk about, to be fair, because it's basically identical to an M10P. We have the silent shutter, we've got the touchscreen interface, the menu systems are exactly the same ISO dial. Nothing has changed here from an M10P, except, of course, for you Leica files, the external look of this camera is more like a classic M10 with the red dot. Now, there are some items that I do like that have stayed from the M10P. For example, the touchscreen interface. It's very nice when you're in playback and you want to zoom in or move across the frame. I find the joystick incredibly slow to navigate playback on your photos. But there are some things that I don't like as well. I mean, we've got the same old VisiFlex. It's actually fairly sharp, but I do find that there's quite an intense blackout period in between taking a shot and then waiting for the EVF to kick back on. Even off the back screen live view, it's very slow. But of course, if you're using the traditional viewfinder, no problems at all. I get it. Part of me is like, I get keeping the camera the same as the old style because you can just pick them up interchangeably and be very familiar with them. But then another part of me is like, look, this is a big change with the new 40 megapixel sensor. Could we please revamp the ISO dial? I don't think it's been perfected. Could we maybe throw on an extra custom button here or there? That would be very useful, so you don't have to pick and choose what you're going to do with the back dial, for example. There are some things that I think could have changed. We'll see which side of the fence you guys fall on. Okay, so on the M10R, not much has changed except a brand new sensor, fine, but I do wish that we had a brand new VisiFlex. That would be nice. I mean, the diopter on this thing is really easy to bump and move without wanting to, and you can't use the touchscreen when you're punched in to zoom on it. So it's unfortunate. I'm trying to get critical focus on a flower, for example, and I'm centered and I want to move to the bottom of the frame. Well, I can't just use my touchscreen and move it. I've got to use the joystick, and again, as I've said, it's very, very slow. Getting shots of bees in flight on flowers on a rangefinder is difficult, to say the least, but if anybody out there thinks that it's super easy, you could absolutely send your samples of Leica rangefinder shots of bees in flight to Go F Yourself Avenue in Calgary, Alberta. That's a French word, it's real. And yeah, we're really interested to see those. Send them Kara Jordan at wehateyou.com. Now, another thing that's been carried over from the older M10s is the 2 gigabyte buffer size. It hasn't changed, although we do have a higher res sensor. So, I would say lossless DNGs, which of course we love as a format, easy to open everything. We're looking at 50 megabyte-ish, files. I always shoot RAW plus JPEG. I expect to get 35 to 40 shots before the buffer fills. But, that being said, Leicas aren't really the kind of camera that you just hold down and mash at continuous high speed. It is still a UHS 1 card slot, however, so it does take longer to clear that buffer of these big files. I will say though, at least when I'm going into playback, there's no delay bringing the photos up into playback off the card. That is nice. Now, the Leica M platform has always been renowned for being very stable as a platform. The shutter's very silent, there's not a lot of movement or shake, it's well dampened. The camera itself has got a nice solid weight to it. And so that's always helped with sharp pictures handheld at slower shutter speeds. However, we are talking about a 40 megapixel sensor now, and that is going to make things quite a bit more difficult. So I'm a little concerned. I'm going to get some shots on a tripod as well, just to show what the camera can really do. But keep in mind that if you're hand holding this camera at slower shutter speeds, you might not get all of that resolution that you think you're going to get. So of course, the one thing that we're really curious about, which I know you're curious about too, is how is this new sensor going to perform? That's the big news here. We really want to see that for ourselves. So, today I'm just going to be taking lots of sample photos at many different ISOs. We're shooting flowers today just to give you a good color array of files that you can then download and look at and evaluate. We're going to do some street photos as well, and then we're really going to come back and take a look at those before we give our final conclusions. Okay, Jordan, I think we hit like a photography bingo. We got coffee cup, we got Safeway shopping cart, rocks, graffiti, unaware person. I think Leica sends me like a certificate or something now, I think. It's a stupid photo. It's a dumb, stupid photo. Now, we've talked about this before on the Leica M10P, but what I really do appreciate is the silent shutter. I mean, it's not silent, it obviously makes some noise, but in a busy street environment like this, nobody's gonna hear it. And very stable, very minimal shock to the camera. This camera doesn't have an electronic shutter mode. That might be interesting. Traditionally, the Leica sensors have had some rolling shutter issues, but we have no way of knowing on here because we don't have that as an option. And there are some situations like movie sets or weddings and things where you might wanna be absolutely quiet. Might be a nice addition to have. That being said as well, cameras like the Fuji X-T4 blew me away with how quiet that shutter is. It might be better than this, I don't know. Might be worth doing like a ninja silent shutter off. Like good children, shutters should be seen, not heard. Now, unfortunately, we are getting less battery life on the M10R. We're using the exact same batteries as the older M10s. Leica has said because of the newer sensor and the extra power draw, we're getting about 10% less battery life. And I do like to use EVFs and LCDs, which is even more power intensive. So we've been shooting for half a day today. I'm down to about 2 bars on here. But overall, something you might want to have an extra battery for, but still usable. Now, it kind of goes without saying, but we're going to say it anyways. There's no low-pass filter on this 40 megapixel sensor. And it goes without saying because Leica really never has put low-pass filters in a lot of their more recent sensors, and most high-resolution sensors just don't need them. All right, so it's been a few days, we've had a look at the files, and here's my final thoughts on the image quality on this M10R. So first off, it's very clear that Leica M lenses for the most part are able to surpass the 24 megapixel resolution that we've been getting on current M cameras. So in that regard, I do feel that this new 40 megapixel sensor is a good step up. You will get benefits from that extra resolution with your M glass. Now, low light performance, things like dynamic range, those are also improved. We're getting about a stop better ISO performance across the range on this new sensor, which is great considering we're also almost doubling resolution, and we are getting more dynamic range as well. We are now getting a more modernized sensor, and that's a really important thing because I do feel on the older Leica cameras, you always felt like although the look was unique, things like overall image quality, ISO performance, dynamic range, you always felt like you were a couple generations behind the competition. So it's nice that this new sensor feels more contemporary. So anytime we come to a conclusion on Leica M cameras, it's always the same thing. I mean, is this good value for dollar? Obviously not. What are you paying for? A unique shooting experience, that old classic way of shooting. Will you get way better results for your money if you go something Canon EOS R5 or Sony A7R4? Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're not contending that. What's really unique about this M10R, however, is that, a lot of Leica users that are already in the system or, you got the financial means and you want to dive in, that's where this new camera really shines. It's going to unleash a lot of that potential that you have not been seeing on your Leica M glass, especially something like the Leica M50 Apo that I was shooting for a lot of these samples. I mean, that lens was able to resolve way higher than what we ever got to experience on the older cameras. And so that's where I could see this sensor justifying, the big financial costs you're going to get into. On top of that, having better dynamic range, better ISO performance, but keeping that same look, those are all very important things. Now, I do want to say one last thing, and I say this pretty much anytime we talk about high resolution sensors. You have to remember that hand holding these things, getting stability, everything has to be more critical. Your technique has to be better, everything in order to get the full potential out of the sensor. This is still a camera I wish had IBIS. That would have been a really huge upgrade. I know they can't fit it in the body so far. This would also be a great camera to use a tripod for, and honestly, I shot a lot with the VisiFlex EVF because really I wanted to have that precise punch-in focusing, which again is so important. If you are shooting with the rangefinder, I do feel like you want to make sure that that is calibrated, that it's focusing, especially wide aperture lenses, exactly where you want them, or stop down, because otherwise it's very easy to not get the full potential out of this sensor. Anyways, thanks so much for joining us as usual. I hope you guys enjoyed this look at Leica's new high-resolution M body. Leave comments below, let us know what you think. Instagram and Twitter, you can see see the links there. We also have 2 sample galleries on DPReview.com, of course from ours, as well as the staff there at the offices. Please check both of those out. Thanks so much for joining us. See you guys soon.